Testing, 1, 2, 3. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à Comité des finances et de développement économique pour le 1er mars. Declarations of interest, déclaration d'intérêt. There are none. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès verbaux. Minutes 11, 18 janvier. Minutes 12, le 2 février. Minutes 13, le 1er février. Confidential minutes 13, the 1st of February, minutes 14, the 8th of February, and confidential minutes of the 8th of February. And the confidential minutes, I'm told, will be distributed separately at the next meeting because they're not ready or translated, I believe. So on the minutes as presented, carried. City Manager's Office, Bureau du Directeur Général, Statement of Remuneration, Benefits and Expenses paid to members of Council and Council appointees, received. Disposition of 2015 Tax and Rate Supported Operating Surplus Deficit, Règlement de l'excédent de déficit de 2015, hold. Corporate Programs and Business Services Department, 2016 City of Ottawa Municipal Accessibility Plan, Update Report, carried. Economic Development Branch, Direction de Développement Économique, Downtown Rideau Business Improvement Area Boundary Adjustment. We have delegations, so we'll come back to that. And if anyone would like to speak to any item on the agenda, if they could just fill out a form at the door, we'd be happy to hear from you. Planning and Infrastructure, Urbanisme et Infrastructure, Real Estate Partnership and Development Office, waiver of former owner's right under Section 42 of the Expropriations Act to purchase a portion of 2 Emerald Meadows Drive. Carried. Delegation of authority, acquisition, disposal, and lease of real property, 1st of October 2015 to 31st December 2015, 4th quarter, délégation de pouvoir, acquisition et vente de terrain et de propriétaires. Received. Information previously distributed as presented. And then we'll go back to the first item we have delegations for, which is the Downtown Business Improvement Area Boundary Adjustment, and we have first speaker is Peggy Ducharme, Downtown Rideau BIA, followed by Yasna Jennings and Stephen Manuck from the Byward Market BIA, and then Chris Bradshaw. So we have Peggy Ducharme up first. Oh, there we go. Just-in-time delivery. Hello, how are you, Donna? Hello, is that mic working?
Test, test, there we go. Thank you. Oh, sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Downtown Rideau Board of Management, I would like to take this opportunity to provide you additional information on the following issues pertaining to the Downtown Rideau BIA's boundary adjustment item on today's agenda. All of the properties we seek to include in the Downtown Rideau BIA are currently not in any BIA. I'll be speaking to, just quickly, a 6-year process, how we are supporting the city's official plan and policies, including Rideau Street east of King Edward, including adjacent cultural properties, stakeholder awareness that, concerning properties west of the canal, full versus associate membership and shared boundary on George Street. This has been a 6-year process for the Downtown Rideau BIA, engaging the city back to 2010. We've invested significant amount of monies as well as hours in this initiative. Supporting the official plan policies in the ways of the Downtown Ottawa Urban Design Strategy, which identifies downtown Rideau as the city's retail arts and theater district and shows the National Arts Centre as part of our district. This is one of the main reasons why we're including, asking to include the National Arts Centre. We have formed our mission, vision, and brand as Ottawa's Arts, Fashion, and Theatre District based on the city's official plan policies for our BIA and positioned downtown Rideau as a shopping destination and cultural hub as a result. Including properties east of King Edward, we are supporting the 2013 City's Boundary Expansion Study that recommends we continue pursuing our original boundary expansion and adjustment of our boundary on the western edge, as well as include properties east of King Edward along Rideau Street. We further seek to increase the length of retail stroll along Rideau Street by inclusion of these properties, which many shopping retail studies have concluded is beneficial to a shopping destination street. We wish to support the city's investment in their unified streetscape that they have recently installed along the length of Rideau Street by including all of Rideau Street from Parliament Hill to the Cummings Bridge in downtown Rideau. Regarding cultural properties, we seek to include the National Arts Centre, Bytown Museum, Confederation Park, Bytown Cinema, and La Nouvelle Scene to strengthen our cultural brand as submitted in our original letter of intention in 2010. As well as the NAC and Bytown Museum have expressed their desire to be included in the downtown Rideau BIA boundary and submitted letters thusly. La Nouvelle Scene, located 2 blocks north of Rideau on King Edward, has expressed interest to be a part of the Arts, Fashion, and Theatre District. We therefore have included them as a property in this boundary adjustment. Over the years, adjacent cultural properties have expressed desire to have the same opportunities and support that their cultural peers located in the Arts, Fashion, and Theatre District receive from the downtown Rideau BIA. Adjacent cultural properties want to be a part of the cultural hub, synergy found within the Arts, Fashion, and Theatre District, and to collaborate on large-scale productions requiring assembly of multiple venues such as the NAC Scene Series, Magnetic North Theatre Festival, Canada Dance Festival, TD Ottawa Jazz Festival, Ottawa International Animation Festival, and so on. Regarding stakeholder awareness west of the canal, we support the city's 2013 boundary study that recommended consultation, briefings, and reporting to adjacent stakeholders and city council in 2014 and 15 of the process and the properties in question. The study process included information on the downtown Rideau BIA's original intention, as well as the properties on our western edge and those being suggested for Rideau Street east of King Edward. The Byward Market BIA's letter included in this package makes reference to that timeline and the NAC on our western edge. Full versus associate membership, we wish to distinguish the difference between full and associate membership in a BIA context. Associate membership is offered when membership is not available. This is not the case in this application. Associate membership full membership equals a property within the BIA. Associate membership equals a property outside the BIA. BIAs are geographically based and typically do not attract interest from properties outside their boundary. The Downtown Rideau BIA has had an ad hoc associate relationship with the NAC and Bytown Museum since 2010 in anticipation that they would become part of the Downtown Rideau BIA. The ad hoc associate relationship includes listings on our directories and maps. As associate member, cultural properties outside the Downtown Rideau BIA would be required to pay an associate member fee and receive limited services, whereas cultural properties inside the boundary would pay nothing or a moderate amount based on their tax class and receive full services. The DRBIA currently does not have an associate membership option. Creation of such an option would consider precedent, expectations, and future boundary confusion between city, BIA, services, and public. Current Downtown Rideau BIA policies support properties located within the... Sorry, done?
If you wrap up,
yes.
Your time's
within
over.
the boundary as eligible. They must be located within the Downtown Rideau BIA boundary, and this is why we are seeking to include the properties we have suggested. And that I'll end. I don't want to take up more of your time rushing through the door. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I should introduce Donna Holtem, our chair of the Downtown Rideau BIA.
Donna, thank you. Questions for the delegation? Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Yasna Jennings and Steve Manuck from the Byward Market BIA. Welcome, Yasna, and you have 5 minutes.
Here? Okay. Oops. All right. First of all, good morning, everybody. Yasna Jennings, Executive Director of the Byward Market BIA. I would like to start by saying we share a border with the downtown Rideau BIA. I would also like to share that we are very good neighbors. We work together well. We've worked together on several different projects. Just this past couple of weeks, we actually had a shared press conference for Winterlude. So we do have a very good working relationship. However, there were some concerns with this process, and this is what we'd like to share with you right now. We did formally submit a letter, which I think most of you have seen, so I'm going to really just touch on a couple of points. First of all, it was very I guess, disappointing for the board that there was very little consultation. We had one meeting with consultants. It was a very, I would say, brief meeting, and we were under the impression that they were going to come back to us to review some of the options, and that did not happen. In our letter, our main objection relates directly to the proposed boundary expansion, which includes expanding north from George Street to include York Street between Cumberland and King Edward. There was no previous discussion or any consultation or notification about this, including this in the overall expansion. All previous information indicated plans to move east along Rideau, west to the NAC, and south to Laurier. This small parcel of land from George to York represents just about the only possibility for growing the Byward Market BIA's levy base. And most people are rather surprised to hear that as the Byward Market, even though we're the #1 tourist attraction in the city, our budget is extremely limited based on property values. So this land is very likely destined for major development and therefore significant financial potential to the Byward Market BIA and pretty much our only option. This parcel of land also represents a major gateway to our district. York Street is the only direct access by car from King Edward Street northbound and is currently labeled as such through NCC directional signage and Byward Market logo discs. Historically, York at King Edward has always been part of the Byward Market. In fact, since its inception in 1826, Colonel By himself specifically designed this street extra wide to facilitate the running of the market and to accommodate the horse and wagons and provide ample space for sale of livestock. Same holds true for George Street. George Street was also cause for our objection. For several years, there have been concerns and complications with regards to the shared George Street boundary. So, for instance, La Bottega is in both BIAs. They expanded into a building. So it shows the confusion along George Street, and through this process, we were hoping that there was going to be a more formal opportunity to discuss George Street. Downtown Rideau BIA collateral and pageantry located along the south side of George Street is often confusing for visitors who are searching for the market only to see banners and signage saying that they're on Rideau Street. This can potentially be exacerbated with the arrival of LRT, confusing visitors by seeing Rideau Street pageantry both in front and behind them when they exit the station. Through this process, we have had several discussions, and we do hope that there are still opportunities to have discussions. We have put forward something that we hope will be agreeable to downtown Rideau moving forward, again as good neighbors. We would request that the parcel of land between George and York and Cumberland and King Edward be removed from the expansion, and that we would like to commence formal discussions immediately with downtown Rideau BIA to review the George Street South boundary and the variety of options and opportunities that exist. We'd also like to review options and opportunities for wayfinding and pageantry along the east side of King Edward. We'd also like to clarify a comment that we put in our original letter. There are no objections to downtown Rideau pageantry on King Edward West between George and Rideau, as there is a current member there. With this process to review and explore additional options for wayfinding in both BIAs on the whole, as we really want to just better serve all visitors to both districts. And finally, we hope that all parties agree to enter into discussions in good faith. So we're hoping through this process that we can continue those negotiations and deal with those stickler points, because the boundaries east to Rideau, farther down Rideau, we have no objections to. And I think I'll stop it at that.
Okay, thank you, Yasna. And your chair, Steve Munuk, who's joined us. Welcome. Councillor Eglai, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. You had said you had put forward a proposal to the other BIA. and you hope to have discussions. Have you received any kind of feedback from the other BIA as to whether what you're proposing is acceptable or might be acceptable?
Yeah, in principle, I would say yes, they're very open to the discussions, but they would have to answer on their behalf. But in principle, there has been dialogue, open dialogue, I would say.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Chris Bradshaw, Friends of Uptown Rideau. I didn't know there was a Friends of Uptown Rideau. There's a Friends of everything these days. Friends of fill in the blank. Welcome, Chris. You know, you have 5 minutes. You're a familiar face here. Glad to see you. Just push your button on there.
Thank you, Mr. Watson, Chair, and members of the committee. Our group, Friends of Uptown Rideau, is a group basically of residents living near to Uptown Rideau's area, both on the lower town side and on the Sandy Hill side. As you realize, this is an unusual main street in that it is a boundary between two community associations, not quite as bad as Beechwood was, which was also a boundary between two wards of the city, which has been taken care of with the expansion by the Vanier BIA. Our group has been around for about 4 years. We meet at the Econo Lodge, who nicely provide us space for our regular gatherings. I formed this group when the group I was working with as a volunteer staff person, the URBA group, which is Uptown Rideau Business Association, was going, and that was an attempt by a number of people. I was only one of them along the way, including former Councillor Bedard, and more recently a doctoral student and lecturer at Ottawa U in the business school who was trying to get a Sandy Hill BIA started. That was Mrs. Sullivan. All of these failed, and on the basis of that, I was trying to explore options with the business group when it still existed for this, and they did agree to the idea of being absorbed by an adjacent one, either Vanier or downtown Rideau. I think they felt a bit more favor of downtown Rideau, and I, in fact, conveyed that to the president or chair, Ms. Holton, about 3-4 years ago. So I hadn't heard anything since that time, but in general, our group is in favor of it because we'd like to see the street rejuvenated, and we know that the city has done his part by having the rejuvenation of the street, which, by the way, by being involved in the design of that, I can tell you that we agreed from the beginning that the same architectural theme should be consistent along the street, both the downtown and the Uptown Rideau section, which has a more modern look to it than the globe lights which you see through much of the historic area of there, including Cummings Bridge. I have, in my efforts at this time, during this time, developed a business directory of all the businesses along the street, and I have also, because I've led Jane's Walks both in the downtown Rideau section for 4 years, dealing with the pedestrian environment, and then for the last 4 years of the heritage of the retail sector of Uptown Rideau, using records from the city archives, the business directories that are published, as you know, annually through history. And based on those two lists, I think I can provide a good deal of background, and I've already talked with Peggy Ducharme, and I've sent her an outline of what this data is that she might be interested now that she is proposing to move into an area which they are less familiar. I would remind you that Uptown Rideau is a neighborhood-oriented street, like most main streets, whereas downtown Rideau, as they claim, is a tourism, arts, and downtown retailing. I would call it DSTM retailing, which is the old term from planning, department store type merchandise, as opposed to the neighborhood grocery stores, pharmacies, even hardware stores and banks and so forth, and hairdressers, of course, always. So I wanted just to make 2 comments about boundaries. In our area, we had always treated the businesses on either side of the street, most of which are included, by the way, but up Friel Street to Wilbrod, there's a cluster of 8 businesses there which we consider part of the area, and there's another business or premises that has just been added because of your neighborhood retail amendments that have been done to allow small-scale retail without parking to be legally zoned. There is a place that's now used for residential that is very clearly was once a corner store, which is in that same area. That would mean 9 businesses. So I would recommend, if it's possible, that those areas be included. And secondarily, I noticed from the boundaries that BIA wanted to get existing bed and breakfasts and inns included, and they've gerrymandered the boundary on the Sandy Hill side in 2 places, once along Stewart Street, or Daly, and once along, or no, it is Stewart, and also the McGee place at the corner of Daly and Nelson. But there are 3 additional bed and breakfasts that are clustered on Besserer Street between Charlotte and Wurtemberg. I have alerted 2 of those to the fact that this is coming forward, but it's on very short notice. I don't know what their wishes are, but I think they would benefit by the same argument by participating in this on some basis. So, well, that is pretty much the comments I have. I'm available for questions.
Right. Thank you very much, Chris. Are there any questions for the delegate? Councillor Chernyshenko.
Thank you, Chris. Good to see you. Help me understand, then, you gave us a lot of background and quite a bit of context and detail. You are supportive, then, of this report, but yes. It sounds like you'd like to have a few other addresses considered to be added to that.
To consider. If I'm sure they've known of our existence, although Peggy knew a little bit about the earlier business group, she didn't know that we had this Friends of Uptown Rideau continuing on, and we participated quite a bit in the design plan for the street, the second design plan for Uptown Rideau. So we do support it. I would suggest that they look at the boundaries, possibly. I appreciate there's close to a year yet before this will all take effect, and there's going to obviously challenges to the boundaries on a couple other sides as well that have to be looked at. So in the spirit of that possible review, I would make these suggestions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I'll get comments from staff, whether now or after, about the process for considering additional addresses.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next presenter is Steve Manuck on the BIA expansion, and he is the chair of the Byward Market BIA. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I'm speaking as an independent today, not as chair of any of the committees that I sit on. I have a property on George Street, which is on the south side of George. I've been interested in this process for the last 10 years. I did sit on the Rideau BIA at one time, and like I said, I do have a business on the south side. So what I propose today is some of the businesses, if you look on their websites, and as we advertise that we're in the Byward Market. I don't want to speak for a lot of the other businesses, but it is confusing, and sorry I'm taking a little time. I'm a little sick today, that's why I was late, and I'm having sort of trouble speaking. So my proposal is, as a business owner and as a property owner, I would just like the city maybe to look at. I don't want to take anything away from Rideau and make it confusing, because I know that the properties run from Rideau to George, and that's how the proposed levies are done. But I was just wondering why the levies cannot be split. As a property owner, I know that I could fill out applications for when my properties are vacant, to get rebates on my properties when they're empty, and I was wondering why I couldn't fill out a thing to say which part of my building paid which BIA fees. So my sort of thing, adjustment to this proposal is that the businesses on the south side of George be able to pick which BIA they want to pay their levies to.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor El-Shantiri?
Thank you, Steve. But I didn't understand your request, and you're asking if you can split the levy between 2 BIAs. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Can we have staff look into it so later on we can have staff advise us if that be even possible? to have a split.
And I'm sorry not to have more information stuff, but even in the report here, when it says the consultation, and it says that the consultation started in January 2015, we just met it should have said 2016. We just started dealing with Rito about a month ago on this whole issue, so we really haven't had time to look through all of the issues just to say on both sides of Rito and the businesses on George Street.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Thanks very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, so questions to staff now. Who is Saad Bashir? So, Eli, did you have a question? And then
just a question. I'm not sure if Mr. Bashir is the right person to answer that, but I think it's more of a legal. When Mr. Manock suggested if property can pay levy for both BIAs, I'm not sure if that's even possible.
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of anything in the Municipal Act, and particularly Section 210, which deals with these BIAs, that would allow for an overlap, as the last delegate suggested. I can certainly go back and review it in more detail, but I do not believe that is the law as it currently exists.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't think so.
Councillor Taylor, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And just two questions. One, I guess, Sad, I suppose, to you. The report speaks about discussions that took place between Rito and Byward back in 2015, and it says they were unable to land at any kind of accommodation. It doesn't speak too much about Sparks, who I know is opposing the other piece. But if we move forward with this today, what are the opportunities for those BIAs to have discussion? Because we heard from one saying, well, we look forward to having more discussion about this and trying to land on something that works for both of us. I'm a little unsure how that process could take place if we pass this today. And perhaps before you answer that, the second part of that question, which I think is to Mr. O'Connor, point number 4 says, enact the aforementioned bylaw subject to the city clerk and solicitor receiving favorable results on the notices referred to in recommendation 2. So do we have to wait for the businesses to come back and say, yes, we want this? Or how does that work?
The latter part works, Mr. Chair, with regards to actually it's a mechanical formula for filing objections. If this matter goes to Council on the 23rd and Council approves it, then there's a notice period, and I have it here, by which if 1/3 of the property owners in the particular area say they object to it, and if that 1/3, I believe, makes up 1/3 of the total amount of funds, levies, then that would be objection succeeded. And this happened, I think, the last time we did a particular BIA in the Nepean area, then it folds and there is no BIA.
Okay. All right. So then over to you, Mr. Bashir, please.
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Chanashenko, the ideas about the addition of a few properties and the conversations that are taking place between the two BIAs, those conversations can continue until Council. I have spoken with the Councillor's office, the Ward Councillor's office, and if we can come to some sort of an agreement on those discussions, as well as he's going to take a look at those new addresses that have been identified, he may be willing to bring a friendly amendment at Council to the staff report.
Okay. So, and this would come to Council next week?
No, 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
That's end of the month.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Chanashenko, please.
It was more or less answered there, but the key question was the ability to tweak addresses as possible, I guess, before that decision, and then even to add them afterwards. So any further clarification on that would be welcome.
No further clarification other than the Ward Councillor is going to look at the suggestions and bring forward an amendment to the staff report if he feels that's necessary. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Englai, please.
Yeah, it's been an extension of the questions we've been getting. Obviously, you're aware of the discussions, you're aware of what's being proposed, and you know all the players. Is there anything in the proposal that's being discussed that staff would not support? Or in other words, are you flexible on this? Because it's not what your recommendation is. It's going to be something different. So are there any red flags we should know about if this was proposed to council?
The short answer, Councillor, is no. We would be guided by the ward councillor and what the businesses in that area are going to be asking for.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Bashir, could you put the map up there and just go over the current boundaries and just just show us what's being proposed in the area that's in dispute? I've got the map in front of me, but it's very difficult to follow exactly what the issues in dispute are.
Councillor, we don't have a map for the screen, but if you have one in front of you, my colleague Jamie is going to walk us through the map.
Can we not get a map?
Just put up Google Maps, it's pretty easy. Or can you report that?
The report has a map in it. Okay.
Type in private market to Google Maps, the border is pretty.
Well, while we're waiting for that, Councillor Moffat had a question.
He's trying to help with the idea.
No, I think we're doing it over there.
No, use the document that's on the...
Yeah, I think, is someone, Mr. Clerk, Deputy Clerk, getting the map up for us? Okay, so Councillor Moffat, while we're waiting for the map. It's document 1 within the report.
Thanks. Just a quick question on a couple things. 350 at King Edward. That seems to be one of the points that the Byward Market BIA was mentioning. Why is it even included in any BIA? It's a government building. What's the draw to have that building inside a BIA zone?
So, Councillor, my understanding is that that property may be redeveloped in the future, and so there is interest on the part of the BIA to include that property as part of their expansion in light of potential future development. Government properties are also included as BIAs and pay into the BIA through their PILTs, their payment in lieu of taxes.
Right, but is it common that a government building on the outskirts of a BIA would be kind of captured and included? Or if it's just that there's one that happens to be in the middle one by happenstance?
It's to the discretion of the BIA as to where they would like to expand to.
Then the other one is, when you go up King Edward, and I just was playing around on the maps, when you go up King Edward, each street sign says Byward Market, yet the Byward Market BIA doesn't actually come out to King Edward. Is there any, historically, I'm just curious, the reason why it doesn't come out to King Edward?
At this point in time, it wasn't included in the Byward Market as part of the Byward Market BIA. However, as we've heard today, they are interested in expanding and potentially taking that parcel of land that reaches to King Edward. And so we're hopeful that over the course of the next few weeks, there can be an arrangement that's made between the Downtown Rideau and the Byward Market BIA for that parcel of land.
All right.
Councillor Blais, please.
Thanks. You say that the levy comes out of their payments in lieu. Do their payments in lieu go up when they enter the zone? Or are they drawing down from what they're giving us anyways, therefore depleting the tax base, basically?
The BIA levy is separate, so no, they're not drawing down from regular taxes. It's added on to the PILT tax bill.
So it is added to the payments in lieu? Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have the map up?
What? No.
So while we're waiting, Mr. Bashir, has there ever been any discussion amongst those two BIAs that they merge to form one? I don't know if that's the cat amongst the pigeon, but I look at, for instance, the West Ottawa Board of Trade. They combine the Nepean Chamber, the Canada, West Carleton, Goulburn, and Rideau. And I was at their event the other night along with Councillor El Shantiri, and it seems to be working well. There seems to be some challenges with the boundary of Rideau Street. Has that ever been discussed, or is it This is too entrenched.
I don't believe it has been discussed formally, but I think it's a very worthwhile idea to formally discuss and pursue and see if it actually does make sense. There are examples out there in North America where downtown regions are represented by a single big BIA, but to my knowledge it hasn't been discussed at the formal level.
Okay. So maybe the map is now up. Thank you to staff for arranging that. Maybe you can bring us through what we're looking at and the boundaries.
So the dark shaded area that you see towards the upper part of the map, that's the Byward Market BIA, where you see the lines coming across the map. That's the existing downtown Rideau BIA. They're looking to expand eastward along Rideau Street from King Edward all the way to the Cummings Bridge. Northwards along King Edward, and that's where you'll see that parcel of land that the Byward Market BIA and the Downtown Rideau BIA are currently in discussions about. We have northward along the canal to include the Bytown Museum, southward to include the Department of National Defense building and commercial properties in the quadrant formed by Daly, King Edward, Stewart, and Waller, and westward to include the National Arts Centre as well as Confederation Park.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Councillor Harder.
Just one question. I know that there's some discussion around about the inclusion that Mr. Sharm's group wants to add the NAC, etc., being that it's on the other side of the canal. But I'm assuming that it's because they have the new arts court and they want the arts district. Is that the largest reason? There's no financial gain. It's just more of a marketing.
Yes, that's correct. Our understanding is that the Downtown Rideau feels that the inclusion of the NAC would help to strengthen their brand as the arts, culture, and theatre district.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I wasn't intending to ask another question, but after Councillor Moffat, Councillor Blais, third time's a charm. I want to ask a belt and suspenders question here. So, Ms. Similuk, pulling that government building in, we add the levy to their PILT, we send them the bill. Historically, do they pay it? Because I know that ostensibly the federal government gives us whatever they deem, not what we invoice them, but whatever they deem to be what they feel it's worth. What if they don't feel like the levy's worth it?
In most cases, and the one I'm most familiar with is actually the National Art Gallery and what was the Mint and the War Museum. When those properties are added in, there is discussions between the BIA and those properties as to what they think is the value that they will contribute. So it's not actually based on assessment most times. In that particular property that they want to add in, there will be discussions most likely with the federal government, and an arrangement will come forward as to what they will pay. We're not going to bill them based on assessment if they're not going to pay it, because that doesn't help the BIA, because they build a budget with money that never materializes. So there's a lot of negotiations that go on beforehand with the piltable properties, because you actually can't force them to pay, but you want to make certain that whatever they're paying or whatever you come to an agreement on, they actually will pay it. So the story isn't determined just when the vote's taken and they're included in. We then do negotiations with them.
Okay, thank you. But I guess that the point of my question was, so it's great that they agree with the BIA that they're going to contribute X amount to the BIA. The next time we go and send our PILT request, do they then historically say, well, we're going to pay a little less, or do they simply say, nope, we agreed to pay this PILT last year, we'll pay it again this year?
They pay what's on the bill if that's what they have agreed to. Most of these properties on this end are not ones that are in dispute in terms of the value. The properties that are in dispute on the values are the ones that are almost impossible.
The one-off properties.
The Parliament Hills, the Supreme Courts, those are the ones that we have problems with valuation. But office towers are office towers are office towers. Okay. So that we don't have much of a dispute there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Chernyshenko, please.
Yes, just I note there's no presence of Spark Street BA here. I note that, they do, but have not spoken. I note that Councillor McKenney her comment is in opposition to this, essentially over into a different ward. Now, BIAs don't necessarily follow ward boundaries. They tend to more follow what's considered to be a district, which can sometimes cross ward boundaries. Have we had much objection to this from the west side of the canal, so to speak, the National Arts Centre and the Bytown Museum in particular being included? I suppose any border is somewhat arbitrary, but hopping the canal and into a different ward is a little unusual.
Councillor, we did receive 2 letters of support or interest, both from the NAC as well as from the Bytown Museum. In both cases, they expressed an interest in joining the Downtown Rideau BIA.
I apologize if I missed them then, other than Councillor's comments. Did the Spark Street BIA officially oppose and express interest in those properties themselves?
Yes, so we also did receive a letter from the Spark Street BIA that's attached to the report, which indicates that they are in opposition to the boundary expansion and specifically the aspect that includes the NAC and the Bytown. They are not opposed to the expansion of the Downtown Rideau BIA eastward along Rideau Street.
Okay. Other comments?
Well, I think there's a lot of work to do on this between now and when this rises to council, because I don't think this is in the ready state that we would like to see to approve this, and I think there's some discussions that need to occur before council ultimately decides. So I don't mind sending this forward to council, but I do think that there's work to be done before it gets there.
Yeah, just on that, I know that Councillors Fleury and McKenney have indicated that they're prepared to work over the next 3 weeks to see if we can close the gap between the two sides, and I think that would be helpful, obviously, because this is obviously a divisive issue between the between 3 BIAs now.
Just one more comment.
Councillor Deans.
When it rises to council, could we have a better map than this one? Because this is not a very good map. Thanks.
Okay. So on the report, carried. Okay, thank you very much. Next is, if we can ask Ms. Similuk to come forward, the disposition of 2015 tax and rate supported operating surplus deficit. Ms. Similuk, if you can give us just a quick overview of where things stand with respect to the elimination of the deficit for 2015.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report comes forward to you every year as part of our year-end process. Before we close or finalize the books for 2015, and in the report you'll see we actually have 5 sets of books that we have to close, we bring forward to you a report that says if there's a surplus, deal with it, put it somewhere, or if there's a deficit, bring monies forward from reserves to balance it out so that you end the year, you end 2015 with 0 in terms of surplus and deficit. The total deficit for 2015 is $42 million, which represents a 1.35% variance from your total budget. I know people, $42 million is a lot of money, but when you look at it in the context of the bigger picture, it is very much an acceptable variance. Most municipalities want to be within 2% up or 2% down, so we are well within that range. The actual year-end values turned out to be significantly better than we had forecast for the citywide tax-supported services. And those were better mainly because of the discretionary spending freeze and the hiring freeze that was put into place early in 2015, recognizing what challenges we were facing, and because of the light winter we had in November and December. As I said before, all the deficits are being covered with transfers from the reserves, but the reserve balances, because of the fact that the deficit is less than we anticipated, are actually in a stronger position than we had forecast before. We're starting the year with $213 million in the reserves. That's after we deal with the deficits, and they're forecasted to be $267 million at the end of this year. You dealt with all of the sources that caused the deficit in 2015 as part of your 2016 budget. So we are not anticipating a repeat of it, but you've also put in place a budget review committee now who are tasked with overseeing the progress on various aspects of the budget and looking at the solutions that we'll be putting forward for the 2017 budget. And that's my points at this time, Mr. Mayor.
I just want to follow up on 2 points. First of all, thank you to Councillors Eglai and Hubley for this, the establishment of the budget review team, which we had our first meeting, and it gives us that opportunity to ensure that department by department is sticking to its financial game plan. And the second point that the Treasurer mentioned that I think deserves repeating is that we're projecting our reserve funds to go up from $213 million to $267 million. So they're in a healthy state, and that's exactly why we have reserve funds for so-called rainy days when we have challenges as we do in snow operations and so on. So I want to thank the Treasurer very much because I think she's worked very hard to bring us to this point to eliminate the deficit for 2015. So thank you for that. Councillor El-Shantiri.
Just a clarity on the numbers. So that means there's a $54 million increase in the reserve from your projection? Is that what you said?
Yes, we're ending 2015 after you've dealt with all of the deficits with $213 million in the reserves, and we're forecasting that to be at $267 at the end of this year.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dean.
Thank you. And, I do think that, $42 million in the hole isn't ever good news, but it is better than we were projecting. So to that extent, it is good news. I guess my first question is to Mr. Kirkpatrick, and that is, have we now lifted the spending and hiring freeze?
At the through you, Mr. Chair, at the executive committee level, we've retained the same process that was put in place to enforce the hiring freeze. So all hiring is being reviewed at a senior management and an executive level until we are comfortable that we have achieved the targets that were in the 2016 budget for, you'll recall, for administrative savings and FTE reductions. Executive committees just signed off on a plan to reduce the FTEs that we called for in the 2016 budget. But executive committee feels that we should also have a very good handle on the plan to meet the strategy that was in the guideline document for 2017. And so that will remain in place until we're able, and I think you'll see that in probably the second quarterly report that will come forward for your consideration. And at that time, the hiring freeze process could be lifted.
Okay, so we're continuing with both the spending and a hiring freeze for now. And if there is necessary hiring, then it would be done on a case-by-case basis. Is that the case?
The same review and oversight is being given to hiring that was in place during last year with the hiring freeze, yes.
And so the spending and hiring freeze is not likely to be lifted until mid-year?
On the hiring side, that's right.
Okay. And what impact is that having on, we saw that it's almost $20 million saving by having that in place for the latter part of 2015. So what work isn't being done, and what impact is that having on our services? And how is that being monitored?
Well, I would say there isn't oversight of that other at the corporate level. It's happening at the departmental level. The hiring freeze, what was allowed to be exempted from it was any hiring that was required to maintain frontline service delivery, and that still continues to be the case.
So that would be, give me some examples of that.
Where management feels that hiring must take place in order to maintain frontline service delivery, those hirings are exempted from the freeze.
Okay.
And as an example, I can tell you that the FTEs that were focused, our approach, as we told Council, or recommended to Council, and Council agreed. So the FTE reductions for 2015, our first look was at vacant positions in order that there wouldn't be severance costs, there wouldn't be bumping through the organization, that there wouldn't be any impact on service delivery. We were able to find that number of vacant positions with the organization. We're now moving to continue to focus on vacant positions, but also look at some of the classifications that were raised by Council during the debate on the 2016 budget that Council wanted to have reviewed. Those are being focused on now, and none of those are directly connected to frontline service delivery.
Okay, so when is FEDCO actually going to see the FTE reduction strategy?
Through you, Chair, that will be in May at the May FEDCO meeting with the first quarterly status report for the year.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other question, just on the reserve funds, Ms. Sim, like you said, they're actually getting better, but up to $267 million. But my understanding is a lot of that is earmarked for specific things, like those are DCs and
that number doesn't include any development charges. That is your tax-supported reserves, your rate-supported reserves, and your gas tax reserves, all building code as well.
Okay, but those are earmarked reserves. Those aren't general capital reserves that are available to shore up any other budgets.
The two pieces in there that are actually earmarked already is the gas tax, because you're using that for your Confederation line, and the transit. But everything else is available for use for whatever Council decides.
So what's the combination of gas tax and transit reserve? How much of that?
That would be about a half of that, about $100 million.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hubley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I ask my question to the Treasurer, I just want to thank Ken Kirkpatrick for his quick action on the freeze and getting the costs under control for us. That delivers us good news today that we've actually brought that deficit down a bit. My question to the Treasurer is, with these reserves, I believe you're doing a review of the reserves as well to see how healthy each of them are. Like, it's nice to have that total 267, but there's some that may be under and over. Any idea when you'll be able to report back on that?
We are undertaking a look at all of the reserves. We basically haven't had a review of them, a refresh of them, since, in most cases, 2002, when they were initially established. And there's new methodology that's out now that allows you to take a risk-based approach to determine how much you should have in a reserve. There's a sweet spot between having too much and not enough, and our anticipated timing, though, for coming back to you with changes to the reserves and with setting targets for the majority of them would probably be in Q3 of this year.
Q3? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Blais, please.
Sorry, just very quickly to follow up on that, is the timing of that to inform the 2017 budget process?
It's actually to inform the long-range financial plans, because you'll build your targets into what you want to do for a long-range financial plan. You'll set a target. I don't see you actually, in most cases, you may be there at that point right now, excuse me, where you want to be, but in most cases you'll be under, and it'll be a long-range goal to get to that target.
So just speaking of it, when do we expect to have an update to the long-range financial plan more broadly, but also specifically for transit?
We have the transit one. I believe we are looking at Q3 of 2016, and rate, I think we're looking at Q4 of 2016.
This year. Okay.
This year.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. On the report, carried. Notice of motion for consideration at subsequent meetings. Avez de motion pour examiner lors de réunions subséquentes. Inquiries, we have one from Councillor Moffat. Councillor Moffat, please.
Can staff briefly identify the mandatory processes for a special area levy and a local improvement charge, and provide an explanation of the kinds of projects that would typically fall under one funding mechanism or another? Further, can staff identify any additional best practices that they are aware of in other municipalities board would advise be in place with respect to ensuring that there is a consistent, clear, and transparent approach to Ottawa's use of these tools that residents can count on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any other written inquiries? No. Other business? Adjournment? Motion. Thank you, Councillor Shantiri. Meeting adjourned. Our next meeting is the 5th of March 2016. La prochaine réunion le 5 avril 2016. Meeting adjourned.